What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily, and in this video, we are checking out the Revel 7 Pro. So if you remember last week, I unboxed the regular Revel 7, and a lot of you felt that that phone was maybe a little too budgety to bear. This phone, the Revel 7 Pro, actually has a nicer design, better specs all around, and it's not that much more expensive than the regular Revel 7. In fact, it's also free, so sort of the same price, I guess. And I feel like this one might even be more enticing if you're a T-Mobile or Metro customer. If you maybe aren't familiar with the Revel brand at all, the magenta color theme might have given it away already, but this is T-Mobile's own in-house phone brand. They themselves don't make the hardware. It's a company called WingTech that actually makes the phone, but Revel is what T-Mobile calls it, and they've had quite a few Revel smartphones over the years. They're exclusively available on T-Mobile and the prepaid subsidiary Metro, and if you're just looking for the cheapest Android device that's simple, familiar, and free, that's exactly what these Revel phones offer. So I'm going to fill you in on everything you need to know with the Revel 7 Pro. I'll do some comparisons to the regular Revel 7 so you can see exactly what's better in this phone. I'll also show you a couple random accessories that I found that get sold with this phone just for the heck of it. And hopefully this all helps you decide if a Revel is right for you. First things first, let me just quickly show you the couple of things you get inside the box here. This incredibly bright magenta cardboard packet holds basically all the accessories, including a SIM ejector tool, a fat stack of paperwork, and a USB-C to USB-C cable for charging. Underneath that is the phone itself, and I was surprised to see that this blue is actually the only color this phone comes in. Feels like a bit of a mismatch, and that's everything. No power brick or any other items or accessories included. With that junk out of the way, here is the Revel 7 Pro. And I want to just quickly clear up what I was talking about with the price of this phone. Its full retail price is technically $250, which is technically $50 more than the regular Revel 7's full retail price. But this phone is offered for free to new and existing customers, just like the regular Revel, if you opt for a service contract like the Metro Flex Plus plan. If you're a customer already or are willing to switch and you're comfortable committing to this phone for the duration of your service contract, it definitely seems like a decent deal. Just know that if you do ditch T-Mobile or Metro before your contract is up, they'll likely charge you the full price of the phone. So some things to consider there. So somehow, the Revel 7 Pro is even bigger than the already massive regular Revel 7. This phone is precisely 6.78 inches corner to corner. It's the viewable screen area, and while you still don't get the greatest screen to body ratio, those black borders are slightly slimmer all around, which I think solves a lot of people's issue with the regular Revel. I also don't want to understate just how massive this phone is, considering both the screen size and the excess edges that make the whole phone even bigger. This is a tough device to use one-handed. It's really tall, but even side to side, it's a stretch. And I'd say, unless you've had a 6.8-inch budget phone previously, maybe try this out in the store if you can, because it really is quite large. Around back, like I mentioned a moment ago, the Revel 7 Pro comes in one color, blue, and I think that's sort of an odd choice. Black or gray would have made sense. Even making the whole phone magenta could have been cool. But the blue is also a very safe, neutral color, and its fit, finish, and form factor are maybe a little nicer than the regular Revel, in my opinion. The silver grayish regular Revel 7 is cool, but a little industrial looking. The rear cover is most definitely still plastic. You feel that immediately. And the curved housing is nice. It makes the phone feel a little thinner. There's no camera bump whatsoever, just basically an offset glossy plastic piece that denotes where the cameras are. And the color matched chrome looking sides, I think, are a nice touch. They sort of make this phone look more premium than it actually is, even if it all still feels very plasticky to the touch. Now, what's very interesting to me is that for as obscure as this phone is, there are accessories for it out there. These two are what you might see sold in-store. I have literally never heard of Zyzo or PowerLab before, but one is a tempered glass screen protector, which seems perfectly fine. Can't really mess that up. And this is a very unique camouflage-themed case with a little flip-out stand. It's a really thick and rigid case that's probably overkill, but it is definitely going to keep this phone safe, to say the least. And I guess it's just nice knowing there are some accessories on the market for such a unique, not so mass-produced sort of smartphone. Taking a peek at everything else, on the left side, the Revel 7 Pro hides its SIM card tray that also has a spot for a micro SD card. You get twice the storage capacity on the Pro, 256 gigabytes, which I feel like is a ton for a free phone like this. But having the option to pop in an SD card is great too. What's also great is that with these Revel phones, there is literally nothing installed on here that shouldn't be. This phone has like 15 total apps, if that. Just the core smartphone functions and then Google's suite of apps and services, and that's it. It's as bare bones and basic as can be. So you have all your storage ready to use for your stuff, and not awful pre-installed apps or bloatware or skins or the other junk to deal with. Not even a T-Mobile app or anything. It's pretty amazing. On the right side, the magenta colored power button is paired alongside the volume buttons there. The power button does double as your fingerprint sensor for unlocking and getting into the phone. Works perfectly fine and feels plenty fast. You also have face unlock, which feels even faster. At the bottom, the headphone jack is still there next to the USB-C port and your bottom speaker. The selfie camera and secondary speaker are up front, of course, and around back, 4 camera lenses, which I'll talk more about in a bit. So in addition to being bigger, the screen on the Revel 7 Pro is also better, kind of. The 6.7-inch display on this phone is supposedly an AMOLED panel. The regular Revel is LCD, but it's the same 1080 resolution with the same 120Hz refresh rate. So the Pro feature is specifically the bolder, brighter, more colorful AMOLED spec, but I gotta be honest, it doesn't look to me that much better than the regular Revel's LCD screen. I mean, it's colorful enough, which is good. Your content looks very vibrant, but it's not a very bright display at all. This phone, like the regular Revel 7, needs to be at like 80% brightness or more just to be usable. Perhaps it's just a really low quality AMOLED panel or some sort of older technology. Maybe it also has to do with the cheap, very glare prone glass that's covering the display. I'm not really sure, but what would otherwise be a must-have option over the non-Pro version is a bit lackluster in my opinion. The only bright side, pun intended, is that it's a super sharp display, even at its gargantuan size, and the 120Hz refresh rate makes the phone feel fast and look fast too. That's a feature that's found on much more expensive phones, and I wouldn't have blamed Wingtech or T-Mobile if they opted for a 90Hz refresh rate or even a lower resolution, but they didn't cheap out much on the screen as a whole. I'm just personally having a hard time seeing the AMOLED part of the AMOLED display, but perhaps I'm being a little too critical considering this phone's price point. As far as the specs, both this Pro Revel and the regular one are actually powered by the same processor, a really solid Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1. The Pro spec on this phone is 2 extra gigs of RAM, so 8 instead of 6. I don't personally feel that that in and of itself is a decision maker unless you're really, really particular about performance. But on a phone like this, I don't think you'd be buying it for max gaming speeds or speedrunning your workday. Here are the Geekbench scores for both the Pro and the regular Revel, essentially the same with just the difference in RAM noted there. And like I explained at the beginning of this video, one of the biggest benefits in opting for a Revel is that you just get the most basic, bare bones Android experience that I have literally ever seen. Some people compare this to a Pixel device, but that's not really right either, because a Pixel has a lot of Google Flair, different software add-ons, and certain UIs. This is just an absolutely pure stock Android setup with no visual changes and no extra apps besides what's basically necessary. You could even delete most or all of the Google apps if you wanted to have nothing more than just phone, messages, camera, and settings. I mean, it really is that minimal of a setup. And I want to be clear that that's not a bad thing. Lately, a lot of OEMs like Samsung and Motorola have been polluting their phones with pre-installed apps that are starting to get on people's nerves. So getting an Android experience like this is a refreshing change. The downside, though, is that while this phone is running Android 14, I'm not confident we'll see much more long-term software support. The phone has had a couple of security updates, which is nice, but is it going to get Android 15? I wouldn't bet on it. Anything beyond that, not a chance. But again, to some folks, that's great. No new updates to worry about, no changes to the UI. For people who just want something simple, this is as simple as it gets. And functionally, it's still a fast feeling phone. I just think that maybe the optimization that those OEMs like Samsung and Motorola add to their Android Flair help make their phones feel faster and look more fluid than this phone does at times. But it's not a bad performing phone by any means. One other sort of pro feature that this phone has is wireless charging at 15 watts, and actually faster wired charging too at 25 watts. Make sure you go out and get a 25-watt charger yourself, since this phone didn't come with one in the box, and you'll ensure you're juicing up the beefy 5000 milliamp battery at the fastest speeds possible. Given that big battery size, I also suspect that this is going to be an all-day device for most people, probably not going to need to plug it in. That's really going to depend on your usage. Altogether though, there really isn't a sacrifice here with the power and charging setup. Last but not least, this phone has a quad lens camera setup, which honestly feels like a throwback to a couple of years ago when smartphones were just adding more and more lenses for the heck of it. That's sort of the situation here. The 50 megapixel main lens is going to be great for capturing normal, regular pictures. The 5 megapixel ultra wide is a nice add. It's not something the regular Revel has actually, and it's certainly the most useful secondary lens, and something that is often left off of cheaper phones. The other two lenses, 2 megapixel depth sensor and 2 megapixel macro lens for super close-up pictures, those I feel are a bit less useful, but I guess there's no harm in having them, since the main camera components seem solid. And the front-facing camera has twice the megapixels compared to the regular Revel, 16 for your selfie shots. The camera app as a whole is pretty basic. You obviously have your core functions with each lens, along with a high megapixel mode, panorama, hyperlapse, Google Lens pre-installed. One thing that's missing is selfie or live focus portrait pics. That functionality just isn't on this phone, which is odd. And another thing that's odd, the default shooting mode is this overcompensating beauty filter that smooths your face out like a porcelain doll. So if your pictures don't quite look right the first couple of times you try the camera out, make sure you turn off those filters that seem to be on by default, and the pictures will definitely look more natural and realistic. So just to quickly summarize, the Revel 7 Pro's Pro features seem to include a better looking build front to back with a bigger screen, less bezels, and more familiar smartphone fit and finish, supposedly an AMOLED display, but a fairly lackluster one at that, 2 extra gigs of RAM for a tiny bit more performance capability, faster wired charging and wireless charging too, and an ultra-wide camera. It's a lot of extra stuff for the same great price of free if you're a customer of T-Mobile or Metro, or are at least okay switching to them for this deal. It's not an especially pro sort of phone, obviously. It's a basic, bare-bones budget Android device with enough stuff to maybe make semi-tech savvy people comfortable with the purchase. And like I said, aside from the price tag, the other big plus is a completely bare Android setup that I know some folks might appreciate more than anything else. This feels like a decent option, and a better option for sure compared to the regular Revel. But what do you guys think? Does this Revel 7 Pro have enough to compete? Would you buy one yourself? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already. I'll see you guys later.